Alright, this is room 4081. It's a 1-bedroom suite, king. It's a kitchen, full kitchen, with everything you need. It's a living room with a working fireplace, which is really nice. This screen's new. This is the view from the balcony. Looks like they have a wedding going on. Right over here is the pool area. A little chilly, I don't think we're going to be in that. You want to say something? So, up to the right is the main building where the Elements restaurant is. It's a nice view of the James River from this one. From the main entrance to the right is to the bedroom. It's a nice king-size bedroom. There's TVs in both of the rooms. The bathroom. It actually looks like they've renovated these bathrooms. Looks pretty nice. Hey everybody.
Yeah, so everybody hears.
Thanks for letting everyone
He's thrilled to be here. You're set. What are you doing? All right, everybody, welcome. Thank you for coming to our ghost tour. 5 minutes tonight. We are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Carla. I will be your tour guide tonight. I hope I don't get anybody lost or anything. There is a lot of uneven terrain. I'm going to mention that several times on our tour, so just please be careful and mindful of where you're walking, especially as it's getting darker throughout the night. So actually, the siting of KingsMill was the original landing of the settlers. So this area, the history that we know of it dates all the way back to 1607. Again, as the original landing before the settlers then moved further up Jamestown, where there was a better vantage point for them as far as building their settlement. So back to 1607. In 1619, Richard KingsMill obtained this land to build the KingsMill plantation, and from there we grew to several. There's so many of them I have to read them, I'm sorry. So KingsMill Plantation, Littletown Quarter, Bray Plantation, the Pettis Plantation, and the Utopia Plantations. And residents will know this, but visitors might have noticed as you're driving in, some of those names are on the ordinaries in the neighborhoods throughout. So they got that history tied in here as well. Back in the 60s, then the Anheuser-Busch Foundation purchased this land, built Busch Gardens, of course, the Anheuser-Busch plant, and then started to build the actual resort itself. And then we fast forward to today, well, 2017, when the property was purchased by the Escalante Golf Corporation. So they are who is running the resort and the golf courses today. And so the stories I'm going to tell you, some of them can be proved, some of them can't. Some ghosts, some are the stories collected from staff who have worked here for decades, some from guests, and some are just going to actually historical facts about the area. So everybody, like I said, watch your step, be careful, maybe you'll see a ghost. If you have any experience either tonight or on your trip, your stay, your down the road visit, please let either myself or the staff know. I know they would love to hear about it. Put it on your TripAdvisor review. Okay, so we'll get started. We're gonna hear a little bit about the Bloody Ravine. It lies about a mile in this direction over here, over where the Harris Teeter is. You all know back in that way, in the Quarter Path area. It was the site of the Battle of Williamsburg, May 5th in, wow, I just forgot the date, 1862. So Battle of Williamsburg was an important part of the Civil War in the battle for control of the peninsula. Of course, both sides really wanted this area. It's a great route as far as the ports go. It was definitely something that both people were fighting over, and unfortunately on that day in 1862, about 4,000 of the 73,000 soldiers on both sides passed away in the Bloody Ravine. Again, that's about a mile from here, and that area does come through into KingsMill. So it is a very solemn place if you've never been. Kind of very, I don't know, kind of eerie and quiet. And that is one of those things that we have had people, more of the Williamsburg locals, who will go on an early morning run or something, and they have reported kind of that eerie fog-like, like there's something there, but you can't quite pinpoint it. So if you go out for an early morning jog or an early morning grocery run or golf over on that end, maybe there's something that you might see. But it's actually quite common with, especially Civil War battlefields, of people reporting that kind of eerie, I'm being watched, fog-like kind of apparitions. So something to check out there. Do is the Eagles Clubhouse. This is the site of a really good sports bar that we have here on property. Shameless plugs, great burgers, great beer. Please do check it out. It is also the Golf Clubhouse, where you can buy any golf merchandise you want, sign up for golf lessons, and of course tee times. But as I mentioned earlier, this area was built on several plantations, and from their archaeological excavations they found that a lot of the barns and storehouses were in this area. So this was built upon, more than likely, the area that the barns and storehouses were on. So there is an entity who resides in this building who's affectionately known as Mr. Keys, and not too many people who work in this building really care to hang around on the first floor, which is more the basement level, after dark. Mr. Keys is thought to have been a foreman of some kind, and he kind of just walks back and forth down on that first floor. They're thinking he's probably trying to check and make sure all the doors are locked, as well as make sure that people are supposed to be there. So he makes himself known by the feeling of being watched, and it's been reported by some of the bartenders of the sound of rattling keys. I myself have not heard the keys yet. The bartenders can attest to it, but I have had the feeling of being watched down there. Whenever I had to go and check and make sure the bathrooms were stocked, that was a really quick rundown, kick the door open, run back because there was that, like, somebody's watching you. So then when I heard the story, I was like, that makes sense. He's like, are you supposed to be here? So Mr. Keys, you might encounter him if you're over here having a beer late one night as you're checking out and walking out. Maybe you get that feeling someone's watching you. It's more than likely Mr. Keys. He's harmless. He just wants to know if you're supposed to be there. So
we're going there.
DA tour, award-winning, very nice. If you're visiting and that's something you're interested in doing, definitely try and get a tee time. That's going to be worth it. But actually, about the 17th hole, so beyond these homes here with the lights, is the site of that original landing and a settlement called Moodys Run. And you can actually still see the dock pilings from that settlement out there. So if you're out playing golf, or if you just want to run out there and see them too during the daytime, 17th hole, you'll see those dock pilings. So Moodys Run was one of those places. It was a little rough back in the day, a lot of violence. You got a horse race track, taverns, gambling, houses of ill repute. We're not going to talk about that. We got little ones here. But it was a rough area. So unfortunately, just the times being what they were, there was a lot of violence there, a lot of life was lost. So that is just a part of the history here. Some have claimed while they're out there early in the morning of hearing laughter, but there's nobody around. Usually women's laughter. So do with that what you will. But if that it's a really, really beautiful area of the course, definitely go out and see those dock pilings, and then let the golf course know if you heard anybody laughing and there's nobody there, because they would love to hear that story. But Moodys Run, we're actually gonna, when we continue up our walk, there's gonna be another point about that. Remember, that's over at the 17th hole. Town, because it's dark, is the James River. As we mentioned, with Moodys Run over here being a port town, heading up into Williamsburg, you saw a lot of people coming and going, a lot of legal dealings, a lot of illegal dealings. Being the early 1700s, there was an issue with piracy, and the Governor Spotswood at the time up in Williamsburg, he said, I'm tired of the reputation that I'm getting as the governor for not being able to crack down on this. And so he put out a proclamation Anybody who has been a pirate, they need to make themselves known, kind of, I guess, claiming some kind of amnesty. But also, he said, I need one particular man to be brought to justice, and that guy's name was Edward Teach. And does that ring a bell with anybody? Yeah, exactly, Blackbeard. So not just a story, he's a real guy. So if you can believe it, Blackbeard the pirate was up and down the James River as well, causing mayhem and foolishness, and the governor said, I can't deal anymore. He tried to get the governor of North Carolina to help him with the capture of Blackbeard, but the governor of North Carolina was getting a kickback from Blackbeard. So he said, you're on your own.
Blackbeard?
Exactly, I never heard of him. Which is ironic, of course, because with the battle that ensued between essentially kind of like the bounty hunter fleet that went for him, they had the capture in the Outer Banks. So they're like, well, it's kind of ironic. Exactly, Ocracoke. And that is where Blackbeard was beheaded. Several of his crew members taken captive, and they mounted his head on the bow of the ship and rowed it back up the James River to Williamsburg. As one does. Exactly. As one does. That is your hood ornament as you roll up to show off that you did it. So of course he was brought up to Governor Spotswood up here in Williamsburg as proof he's done and gone. We're not doing this anymore. And several of those surviving crew members were tried in Williamsburg and were executed. So if you haven't been to that Colonial Williamsburg area yet, check it out. The Governor's Palace, Mansion, the courthouse, all of that. So a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about here, you're going to be able to see over there if you go and walk around. So that's our Blackbeard story, and we're proud of it. All right, so the building behind you was built in the 80s. It's a resort center, really only been here since they started offering the overnight accommodations. And this is the site of, it's either the most activity or just the most noticed because the majority of employees work in this building. So first off is going to be a little boy who resides on the second floor. It's the conference level. He goes between the Yardley and the Tazewell rooms. We don't know his name. We assume that he lived here on one of the plantations, and he's known to run up and down the hall and leave like little bits of crumpled paper. But staff who are closing up at night, usually the MOD, going around locking all the rooms, have heard a child running up and down. And then there have been guests, if they're sitting having a drink, they say, whose kid is that down there? Like, whose kid's running around? We don't know whose kid's running around, but he just is. We don't know. Where is he? Yeah. You always get that mom who's like, oh my gosh, whose child is that? Right? We don't know, but he's just there. So, any kids want somebody to play with, maybe you can go find him. But yeah, he's sweet. He just likes to make a little bit of mischief. Let me see, the second one's going to be on the 4th floor, which is an administrative level. We're not entirely sure what the situation is there other than potentially just the history of this location. Plantations, there's been a lot of violence. There is a heaviness on the 4th floor, just a bit of like an emotional kind of feeling, and then there tends to be things that break on that floor. Not the other floors, just the 4th floor, whether it's a plumbing issue or an electrical issue. So there's something residing on the 4th floor. We don't know what it is. We just don't bother it. And just keep fixing the things it breaks. It's great. It's great for the GM continuously writing that check. Yeah. And then the most fun for apparitions or things like that we've had here is the night auditors have seen, it was 2 fuzzy balls of white coming from the very top, 5th floor, coming down through the ceiling and continuing on through the floor. It's about 3 in the morning and they were on their shift. Fuzzy balls of light, didn't do anything but just drop down and go back down, continuing to go towards the Burwell Ballroom. That's definitely one of those things they recount. They said that they were, doing their audits, looked up and saw it, said that's happening, and then went back to what they were doing. They're like, we're not going to engage. But the spirits here, for the most part, are, they're harmless. They're just here. So again, we're not sure what the fuzzy balls of light are, but they just drop down. They're just traveling. So if you're having a drink late at night, maybe you'll see something over there too. So let us know. Let us know. Or if you maybe you're
Carry
sober,
the
too.
one.
At KingsMill, recent renovation in the last couple of years, but was previously known as the Pettis House or the Anheuser-Busch House, depending on what time you were here. The Augie Busch House. And so I mentioned Pettis earlier, you might recall. Oh, I'm so sorry, we got a couple more. Oh, I'm sorry. All right, this is the Pettis, the site of the former Pettis plantation. They built when they were gutting everything and rebuilding, because this home, its foundation is only about 30 years old, but it sits on the site of the original Pettis plantation. And the adults here might recall a movie from the 80s where they built homes on old sites where there were also graves, and then they put a pool. Yes. There is a gorgeous infinity pool on the backside. We haven't had any of those that kind of experience that I'm aware of. But it was definitely what went through everybody's mind when we said, "Oh, you're putting a pool in now? Is that a good idea?"
Exactly what happens next.
Exactly.
And then you got a clown in the closet.
Clown in the closet is going to be it for me.
No TVs allowed.
Exactly. And this house actually, it almost rivals the resort center on how much activity and reported accounts people have. So there's been sites, at least in the old Pettis house, of a woman walking back and forth when there's nobody checked in. So the typical, the lady in white. But she was seen, at least in the 90s, I remember seeing of her walking back and forth. The basement, of course, no airflow.
Yeah.
The guy that I know who was the gopher that we were talking about, this is his story. He went down to the storage room in the basement to get linens for a wedding, and Augie Busch's old rocking chair was in there. No draft, nothing, just rocking back and forth.
Nope.
He didn't even get the linens, he just left.
Yeah.
And
Smart.
he will not go back into
Good.
the basement.
Yeah.
He'd rather not go in the house, period, but the basement is a no-go for him.
I support him.
Yeah, right, we support this decision. There's a deer over there. Sorry. Kind of ADD.
Oh, we know him.
Yeah, we know
It's
her.
a squirrel deer.
Exactly, there's a squirrel
right?
deer.
We met her earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's
She's a good girl.
Oh, yeah.
so
Oh,
sweet.
that's a
that's her
buck.
boyfriend.
Oh, wait, yeah, that is her
That's a
There's a
boyfriend.
whole
Right.
herd out here. That runs
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
So yeah, be careful.
Watch out, buddy. It's not your time to be in the light.
No. All right, deer crossing.
To staff and the people in the area here.
It's about the poor KingsMill police officer who came to make sure it was locked up. So that was just a nightly routine. You go and you check the locks, especially now with all this renovation they put in. And so this was back when it was still the Pettis house. The alarm was going off, so he just went to check and make sure, there's malfunction. What's going on? And he was confronted by a shrill scream and the sound of what he said, it sounded like a chain rattling. So he booked it out of here, said there's something in that house, I'm not going alone. And to this day, if you're having the police officers come up and check, they come in pairs. they're like, we're not going to go alone. So again, nobody's been hurt that we know of, but this has a little more activity that's a little more, I'll say, interactive with people. But you absolutely can stay here. It's beautiful. It's lovely. They did a great job.
Is it like a...
The final stop of our tour before we head back up to the resort center. So we're going to close with the most popular KingsMill resort story. And this one dates back to the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's known as the gate guard ghost. So what had happened was, I'm sure you noticed when you came in there, doesn't matter which gate you came from, you have to stop and see the gate guard before they let you on. So there was a guy working at the gate that night, and he hears noise of somebody coming up towards the gate. Pops his head out and sees a full horse-drawn coach. People in the back having a good time, little coachman driving the coach. And he's like, oh, there must be some kind of historical events and dress-ups and all that kind of stuff that happens here. So, oh my gosh, that's perfect timing. So when he comes out and he's like, oh, the coachman says, we're going up to the big house, more than likely the Pettis House. And he's like, oh, okay. Steps back inside to grab his clipboard to see if there's an event that he might have forgotten about or something. And when he steps back out, the coach is gone. So, what I mentioned was an employee. So, he quit that night.
Sure.
And that's one of those stories that some of the policemen believe it, some don't, and some just don't want to talk about it at all. The ones who have been here for a while, because they probably saw something too, and they just said, we're not going to talk about it. So that was the one account we have of a full, complete apparition of and people speaking to somebody, and that poor soul just couldn't take it. Couldn't take the heat.
I think they said the big house because that's what they used to call the main house,
Right,
like in
right.
a plantation.
Exactly. So we're like, probably that one.
Yeah.
So they're going
That's
out
what
to a
they
party. So maybe that's who she is up there. She's waiting for her guests. I don't know.
Oh
but,
my gosh.
but that's the one that's most well known from staff here. So that's all the ghost stories and history I have for you today. So we'll just gotta carry this on up back up to the resort center.